and thank you so much for tuning into another episode of TNT The K-Cal Kids. I'm Ty Justice.
Todd Fox.
And we're here talking about some of our favorite things growing up. And that would be starting out with a classic cartoon, specifically a classic Disney cartoon. And this one is going to be Motor Mania. We mentioned it in our first episode. Now we're back talking about it a little more because it's a very interesting piece of motorway Americana.
Yes.
It's seen in traffic schools. And now I went online. It's not just me. Now there are other people that went, hey, there's this great short. It's on IMDb where somebody commented, I saw this in driver school because I got a speeding ticket or got a ticket and had to go to driver training, and this is what they show you. So it wasn't just in mine because I wasn't sure if it was just my class and the one instructor that was like, hey. But at the same time, I don't know how legal that is with Disney because they're very litigious about how and where their stuff is shown. So I don't know if Disney knows the DMV or people that, it's not even the DMV, but it's individual driver schools that are showing this. But apparently it's pretty widespread.
Yeah, I've seen it in places like even truck school. So because they because they try to like when I was going for my class A, that's the first time I saw it in in any kind of like schooling. Because it wasn't in DMV I was in or the driver's ed that I was in school, but I did see it in one of the trucking schools that I went to. Yeah. And it tripped me out because I thought the same thing. Like I remember one of the guys was like, "Hey man, those guys look a lot like Goofy. Like isn't there a copyright with Disney?" And I'm like, "That is Disney."
Yeah, exactly. That's a Disney cartoon.
Yeah. So they were pretty surprised to see it, but it's telling, and I'm sure we're going to get into it, but that cartoon, breaking it down, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah, and you think it's just a simple, Dr. Jekyll and Hyde thing, because it is an interpretation of Jekyll and Hyde, because it's about Mr. Walker, who is a kind person that wouldn't even hurt a fly or step on an ant, and the moment he gets behind the wheel, as the narration, unfolds, he turns into this Jekyll character or Mr. Hyde character from Jekyll, this mild-mannered little milk toast, to this demon behind the wheel, and everything changes about him. The wheel is when he turns when he gets behind it, and the narrator points that out. And it's an interesting transition, but it's a comical retelling of Jekyll and Hyde using modern problems from 1955. Yeah. So because that's when this short was originally released. And it's amazing, and we said this before, how little has changed. Someone was noting that there's kind of a slowdown in creativity or in the quality of the shorts from the 30s to the 40s. And at first I had to take a step back going, what are you talking about? But then when you think about it, everything was so homogenized by the 1940s and the 1950s when Motormania came out. Because in the 30s, they were working shoulder to shoulder at the Hyperion Studios, basically, that they all had to work, next to each other, sweating together, and there was a different energy there. They didn't have a lot of money like Walt did when he finally moved them a couple of years later to the Burbank building, and and all the huge studio that's there now had their own ink and paint building, the whole department. But there was a different energy, there was a different creative process then, and I had to look at it and go, yeah, well, I guess the 40s were kind of an era of sterilized, homogenized animation for Disney, because they had the war era, so everything had to be a certain way. So that previous kind of slightly anarchistic way of creating shorts and being reverent did kind of go away. Some of my favorites, when I look back, of both the beauty and the comedy mixed, was in the 30s, Mickey and Donald. But Donald was the only character that really got to stay irreverent, I think, throughout. But Goofy and Motormania, I think this is kind of a callback to their previous kind of style in the 30s, where it was just kind of in your face, and it mixed, the new at the time, modern, atomic age kind of values with that classic storytelling, like Jekyll and Hyde storytelling. It was very effective, and it kind of had that little glimmer of what Disney shorts used to be. But yeah, unfortunately, they did get a little more sterilized in the 40s. But this was kind of a fun little throwback to what they were before. They were all still good, but they were different.
They were, and we talked about in the last episode how they went into different, genres, or they changed up characters. They had musicals with telling the story, and
they retold fairy tales with Mickey and all that.
Yeah, like other ones I forgot to mention last week was Casey Jones, the engineer.
Yep. Oh, I love that one.
The music was great.
Yep.
The tale was great. Also had what was the other one? Casey at Bat.
Casey at the Bat. Now, there were two of those. There was Casey at the Bat and Casey Bats Again. Now, that one's a little harder to track down. I think I have it somewhere in the collection. But I loved Casey Bats Again because it's we had all the daughters. Because, you didn't have a lot of sequels, especially for, like, offbeat characters.
Yeah, yeah.
But that one, he did get a sequel, and it's very odd that he got that. But it was such a beloved short that, when he, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it yet, but he screws up the last because he's so arrogant and full of himself. He misses the last hit at base, and it ruins his career. Ends up getting married, having 7 kids, 7 daughters, and they were all girls because he thought every subsequent child was going to be a boy. So
he could pass it on.
Yeah, he can pass it on, make him the greatest ball player. And it ended up being a bunch of girls who ended up having that natural talent, so he starts a girls' baseball team, and it's about coddling his ego, and it's actually a very complex short as well. But that was also a good one, also based on baseball.
Teaching points, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was what was the other episode I was thinking about too? There was the little Twister and the mobile home. I don't know if you remember that one. There was one too where a guy got the hamsters. The training engineer guy had gotten the hamsters. He had to they kept spawning. They kept having more and more babies.
That was later on though. That was like one of the 50s or 50s. Yeah, it had to be 50s. I think.
Yeah, but you had like stories like that.
Yeah, But yeah, they really had some great homespun kind of stuff, and those were usually the best. Yeah. And those were fun. But like I said, Motor Mania was kind of an interesting thing because it was a mix of different. Elements in that, and I think the thing that makes it so relatable today is nothing has changed.
Yeah, because
that's why they still show it,
and that's why I love about it. Because again, like to your point when you first brought it up, like he's in the house, he's kissing his wife goodbye. He's I think it is an aunt that he looks at and he's excuse me, and he kind of walks around him and like tips his cap to the neighbor or says something, hi neighbor.
Very congenial, very friendly.
Yeah, dressed really nice, ready to go to work, the 9 to 5, typical American thing.
Right.
And he steps in that car, man, and like the narrator says, it's like he turns into the Mr. Hyde, and it's like
Mr. Wheeler.
Yeah, Mr. Wheeler. He's no longer Mr.
Walker Wheeler. It's hilarious. And it's not just him though. It showcases all the characters in that short and how they all act when it comes to being on the road, crossing the street. Seeing, I think the hood ornament turns into like a sight, like on a gun, and it's like trying to like locate people, and he's moving around or like try to hit people.
Trying to get out of the way.
Yeah, and the car just charges. Mr. Wheeler just tries to run this guy down, and it's fascinating, but it's something that's just so shocking to see then that it was happening then and it's happening now.
And to side point to that, when he gets off the street and gets, he's happy, he's, because he's over there shaking his fist
in the car.
Yeah, and then he gets onto the on-ramp, and then it's just instant traffic. and
it's like, 30 seconds of my life, I'll never get back with the red light. But
but he gets stuck in traffic, and it throws me off too, because the time period you would think that's the the start of freaking freeways.
Yeah,
and they're supposed to be open,
right?
And then he's jam-packed into traffic that we see today in the LA area.
Yep.
And it's funny because I always hear that in the back of my head. My dad says, yeah. Every time we get stuck in traffic, my dad would say, traffic is that was supposed to be the end-all, be-all, the invention, the new thing to keep people moving. Yeah, we're not moving anywhere. And he's like more and more animated and upset.
If you knew his father, you'd be on the floor because that is spot on. No offense, Ralph. We love you.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, he's always argued and hated the fact of a freeway. And then to see it back then in its very early stages, and nothing's changed.
No, and that's the funny thing. If you think about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the whole plot of that film is about making freeways.
Correct.
And the Christopher Lloyd villain character is like, traffic will be a thing of the past.
Yeah.
That's the joke.
Yeah.
He's in 1988.
Yeah, he's like, the billboards, it'll be amazing. You're just free flowing city to city. It'll be so beautiful.
Because we had an accurate transit system here before. We had trolleys, and they would have built up and been as accurate as they are in New York or other metropolitan cities, but those big businesses tore those down. The
basis of that movie was it's still to this day, and it's always argued that it's just someone's dream or a conspiracy that was the case. But my dad says it's about 50% true,
right?
Because of the tire industry and them wanting to build more cars.
Was it Firestone? I
think
they implicate in that allegedly.
And the freeways specifically cut off the red cars. You know, they made it so that they couldn't go over or under. It'd be more expensive for them to do it. So, and they weren't city owned at the time, like now today's trolleys are.
Right.
They were a private company. They couldn't afford all that retrofitting and stuff. So, not to go too far off, but
no. It makes sense, but it connects though. That's the funny thing though. What you were saying does connect, and it tracks because Motormania, the traffic, you know, it's obviously always been a problem. And these freeways and a lot of these bridges were built in the 30s and 40s. That was a huge time period for growth.
And when trolleys started being phased out, I think nationwide it started in 51, and then, you know, as tire companies and they started saying, hey, we don't want the trolleys, like they started phasing them out completely by 61. So it took a good 10 years, but they were squeezing them at that point.
Yeah, my grandmother, when she was still alive, remembered she worked at United Artists Theater. She was a candy girl, and it's off of Broadway. I think it's off of like 8th and Broadway or something like that. And she remembers just going from Bunker Hill, taking the trolley, 10 o'clock at night, you know, coming back home, and, you know, it was fine. But the trolleys were a big part of people's lives.
Absolutely.
You know, you could just hop on, hop off.
They depended on it. Not everybody had a car, so a lot of people depended to get to work, to get to the grocery store.
Yeah,
everywhere, dude.
And it's only in this country where we've demonized people taking public transportation. So, you know, you're a poor, you're a loser, you're this or that, which is absolutely not true. But you know, there's this idea that you have to have a car, you got to drive around, and we have such an unreliable transit system that, you know, you have to almost have a car.
Well, couple that with the fact that, again, you have the homeless takeover, and they don't have enough funding to regulate that into. I mean, they're doing a better job now, but up until like this year, I mean, it was terrible. I mean, so not only you being detracted by saying, oh yeah, you know, you take the trolley, why are you not driving? You know, it's like, well, I'm saving money, I'm doing this, it's easier, it's more efficient. But they don't want to hear that, and then you got to deal with the unpredictability of the homeless or the people that are on drugs or have mental issues. And it's sad. Trust me, like those people need the help, but the help shouldn't be coming from the transit system.
Right, I know. It's all connected that way, which is unfortunate. But that a lot of times that leads to a lot of road rage because we have overcrowded freeways, overcrowded cities,
and we get a lot of Mr. Wheelers.
Mr. Wheelers, yes. And there is something about getting behind the wheel and just being like, there's that saying where they're like, yeah, when you're a pedestrian, and you're like, yeah, hit me, bitch.
Yeah.
And then when you're behind the wheel of the car, you're like, I'm gonna hit you, bitch. It could be the same day.
Either way, we're gonna get some contact.
Exactly. So a lot of times, you know, there is that change, but yeah, that's an interesting thing that it's been happening for so long. But it's interconnected to a lot of different things. I mean, the short is funny. It's a comedic short, but it's not meant to be dramatic. But this is the conversation these days that it does inspire.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in the class I was in, they weren't focusing too much on the car aspect of the thing. They were focusing in on, your temper can't be allowed like this, because imagine what he does in a car, in a vehicle, how upset he loses it so fast. You got to keep your cool. You got to understand that people are going to cut you off. You're a big rig. Yeah. You got to take it to the next level. You got to keep calm. And so they were almost going opposite, but using learning points. Like, look how he looks at the people. You can. So there was a lot to learn from that short little video. And the guy kept hitting pause.
Right.
Because he was breaking it down like you would break down film.
Yeah, exactly. Well, which is a great thing, because there are so many points that are relatable, and he's right. Mm-hmm. Becoming Mr. Wheeler in an 18-wheeler is
not good.
Not good. I mean, that's mass murder.
Yes, and it has been. We've seen it. So
yeah. See, so I remember. Do you remember in high school? Do you remember the red asphalt videos from high school?
Yes.
Did they show back in the day? I don't know if they do this anymore, but when we were in high school, they would show these videos in DMV driver training classes. Because you're a teenager, you usually have that class in high school. Red asphalt. With me, it was Red Asphalt 3. That's the one they were showing us. It was probably really old by then.
We didn't have a title, but I just remember it was like video from the late 60s, early 70s, and we're talking about like cars wrapped around a tree.
Yep.
Or them pulling, it being hard for them to pull a body out of a vehicle, or someone that they'd have to scrape off the ground, someone that was burnt. It wasn't pretty.
So with ours, it was in color. Yours might have been too, but the thing is, in public school, you see a lot of really old stuff by the time you get there, and the stuff we saw was still old, but still crazy because Red Asphalt 3, I don't know how the teacher got a hold of it, but my goodness, they show dead bodies, they show accidents, actual video footage of accidents, scraping brains off the street, all that stuff, and you just see these people. I remember them. I remember their dead eyes on their dashboard. They weren't wearing their seatbelt. They crashed into the steering wheel, and them just like staring out dead. It's terrifying, but it makes you kind of aware, and you never forget that because it's important. You need that as a teenager to teach you, and these people still don't learn. But these videos do help you, and in a much less graphic way, Motormania helps you too. It's a funny name, Motormania.
Yeah.
But it was kind of fascinating. But this one had a pretty solid crew on it, and you had Dick Kenny and Milt Schaefer. Dick Kenny and Milt Schaefer did the story. The animators were John Sibley, Charles Nichols, Ed Ardell, and Jack Boyd. Let me see. Your layouts were by Al Zinnon. Claude Coates did the backgrounds. Music was by Paul J. Smith, who did a lot of music on these shorts. And, of course, it was directed by Jack Kinney, because a lot of the directors were also storyboard guys. When you were a director, you basically wrote the whole thing. You created the short. I don't remember where I saw this for the first time. It was probably K-Cal Kids.
I believe so. It was the same thing for me, because, again, I didn't start collecting VHSs and stuff like that till probably I was around right after this time came out, because that's when I was like, hey, I want to build my own collection.
Right.
So that's when I started to do it. So I think it was K-Cal Kids that introduced me to most of Disney's older stuff.
Yeah, well, same here, yeah. And the funny thing is, the other one that came after that was Toontown. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, in our first episode, there's a clip you can see of the introduction to Toontown. And it's so funny because it unlocked a memory, because I'd completely forgotten about that show. And I think I told you that too, so much when we were recording. I'm like, I forgot that. But then when I saw and heard the video, it just all flooded back. I'm like, oh my God, I remember this. The hosts were it was a Mexican girl or a Latino girl and a white guy. And I looked them up on IMDb, and they continued in their pursuits. It's interesting to watch them now, but I remembered them, and I'm like, I watched so much of this show as a kid, and I had completely forgotten it. So I'm so glad you brought that up. But
it definitely played off of K-Cal Kids.
Yeah,
it was almost like, okay, the first group got a little old in the tooth, and then they opened up Toontown, so it was again a perfect way to say, hey, come see a new area.
Yep.
And then also relive your past. Yeah. Watch some nostalgia.
It was really good, but yeah, that was Motormania, and that's going to be our first short. Now we're going to talk about something in our next segment that I like to call Animation Mecca. Which was basically the Saturday morning lineup. And I chose the year 1990 because that was kind of peak Saturday morning cartoons in the eras we grew up in. So in the era, we grew up in.
90s were great, I'm sorry.
They were terrific. I mean, you had everything. Unfortunately, by then, everything was kind of at its peak, and you could see the bottom of the hill. Like, it was starting to kind of ebb. Yeah. A lot of shows were going to get canceled. There were a lot of new great shows on the horizon, too. And I think for Saturday morning, one of the standouts I wanted to talk about is actually it was still on the air in 1990, but that's around the time where it was kind of seeing the end of its run too, which was Muppet Babies, Jim Henson's Muppet Babies. And it was one of the first shows I remember ever existing as a kid, because it started in 1984, and it really had a profound effect on a lot of kids. And especially it's especially interesting now because you can't get a hold of it. Mm-hmm. You can go to the Internet Archive, I think, and find people's VHS recorded copies for a certain. You can find, I think, most episodes, but it's never been digitally available. It's never been put on DVD, complete. I mean, Laserdisc, tapes. They didn't really have complete episodes or complete runs.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Two things about that show. I don't remember the parents or how that worked. I just remember it was almost like a nursery type thing. They would have adventures inside the nursery. They would use their imagination. You had all the main characters. And then two, wasn't it during the time they made that production when Jim Henson was making a lot of Muppet type movies, and they were kind of big in the theaters, right?
Right.
So it caught the kids' attention, and then the toys came.
Good. So I'm glad you asked that. I'm going to answer those backwards.
All right, perfect. Hey,
because
perfect.
it works perfectly. Because Muppet Babies was actually a spinoff of a live action segment from The Muppets Take Manhattan. So there's a dream sequence where they're live action puppets, but there are babies, Muppet Babies in a nursery. And that kind of became the origin for Muppet Babies. Now, Jim Henson was contacted a lot throughout that time about doing a cartoon show because, the Muppet Show was big in the 70s, ended in, I think, 81. There's a great documentary, if you haven't seen it, called Of Muppets and Men, which there was a companion book, which I have, and it was very expensive at the time that I got it, but because it's out of print, 1981, but it talks about the whole run of the Muppet Show, and the documentary was done during the last season. But Jim was constantly approached to do things like that, merchandising and all that, but he was, a very special type of creator that didn't just want to make money off a show. He always said that it had to be, if he was going to do an animated series, it had to be based on something special. It couldn't just be to make money. It couldn't just be for capitalism's sake. And so the angle that came up was that these, the Muppet Babies nursery, and it's driven by imagination, like childhood exploration through imagination, learning that way, which he really believed in. And so he said, yeah, sure. So in 1984, they developed it through Marvel Studios, which always had that really cool logo of Spider-Man jumping on the, on the studio logo. And they produced that. And Marvel Comics did a comics series based on it as well, Muppet Babies. I'm pretty sure there are comics out there. I could have swore there was. Hope that's not the Mandela effect, but I'm sure they were out there. But yeah, and that's what happened. And now the first question you asked about the parents. So this is kind of like a Muppets origin story, basically. You don't see where their parents are. You never see them get dropped off. They're just there in this nursery. And the nursery, the nanny there is only seen, she's the only adult really beyond dream sequences, and she's only seen from the knees down. So, and as a kid, that drove me crazy. Jim Henson wanted to portray adults the way babies see them. So just basically a voice and knees down.
Yeah, because and that makes sense now because it's bringing it back to me, because that's why I asked the question. I couldn't quite remember the angle of parenting or who was in charge of him, but I do remember, now that you brought it up, one time where Gonzo hurt himself. And I think Kermit said something, and then I just saw the hands come down and Gonzo's gets picked up, but you don't see him be held.
Exactly.
But they're all looking up at her, and then she says something like, "Oh, he'll be okay. He just let me take care of you. He just needs to be reassured." It was one of those lessons.
It's a trip. Well, do you know who did the voice for Nanny?
No.
Do you remember June Cleaver from Believe It to Beaver?
The mother?
The mother.
Oh.
That was her.
Okay, that makes sense.
And she's such a soothing voice. But June Cleaver was the voice of Nanny in the Muppet Babies.
Wow.
And
did not know that.
Dave Coulier was in it for a while from Full House. Howie Mandel. A lot of people did voices on the show.
Howie Mandel, I'm sorry, man. Look, I know he's different now. He's a different type of comedian to everybody, but he was raw back then.
Raunchy.
Yeah,
was bad.
And for him to be doing children's cartoons, because I'm sure at some point we'll talk about Bobby's World, which was very innovative in itself.
Also not available. Yeah.
Yeah, but for him to, and it was funny because, and that's the thing, when I was young and Bobby's World came out, I know I'm going another route.
No, it's all right.
But him trying to tie it into the Muppet Babies, but I remember seeing Howie Mandel come on television one day. I'm watching on Fox Kids. And my mom walks in and she's like, what are you watching? And I'm like, Bobby's World?
Yeah.
And she's like, do you know who that is? I'm like, no. I go, he plays the dad. And she's like, he's disgusting. Like my mom hated raunchy stuff, and he was super raunchy.
He was bad.
Now his stuff, he's more mainstream, he's more, family friendly type content. But back then, dude, he was terrible. But he was like a George Carlin back in the day.
Yeah, George Carlin, but with less of the prophecy. George Carlin, I always say, he's like my spirit animal. Like that
he's
man,
smart.
He was a genius. He was brilliant, and what he said then is still true today. But no, with Howie Mandel, he was a dirty comedian. So was Bob Saget.
Yeah.
To be honest, all right?
Which is hilarious too.
It's hilarious that these guys became family icons. Right? If you ever saw their stand-up, you'd be like, oh my god, let's give this guy a kids show.
Right. I like, but see, back then it worked, right? Because till right now I did not know he was part of Muppet Babies.
There's so much oversaturation, that thing is now, that you can't get away with anything. Like if you ever start an OF and you just do one video, you'll be known forever for that. Like you will never escape.
Someone's going to screenshot it.
You can do that.
So that's what I heard.
That's what we heard. Sorry, but
it's with the rumor.
But with back then, you could do dirty stand-up. It wasn't going to be televised. Groups of people may have known it, but agents didn't necessarily.
Yeah, you didn't have cell phones.
And these guys were just working actors more than anything. They wanted to be discovered, so they took the jobs, and that was a big job. Jim Henson, Marvel Studios, it was a big deal. Jim Henson was the top independent producer of his day because nobody was doing what he was doing. Sesame Street was created, and Cooney, the woman Cooney who produced it, said, we're not going to do it unless we can get Jim Henson. And that's why they got Jim Henson. And man, it was a hit.
I got to throw you a curveball, man. Favorite Muppet Baby?
Oh, Kermit. Kermit was always my favorite.
What was his name? And this is what sucks because he was my favorite, but I can't remember his name. The orange bear.
Fozzie.
Because I had a teddy bear that my mom gave me when I was young, when I was a baby, and I kept it till I was, I think I gave it to one of my kids, but it was Binky. But he looked like Fozzie, just without the hat.
Right.
Yeah.
Copyright infringement. So they're like, let's make him close to Fozzie, but so we can't get sued.
But I love that character because when I was little, like I would hold Binky and I'd be like, Fozzie.
Yeah, I know. And some of the merchandising now, like you find so many editions of like Donald and all these characters, but the Muppet Babies was an era that they didn't really replicate after that.
No, they didn't.
There's a lot of memorabilia out there, but not like other stuff, and a lot of it's very collectible.
Boy, if you were to bring that back, I think that show actually might hit because you think about some of the little children's shows that did take, like, to me, I thought Rugrats was a form of that. In a way,
those shows are a trip from the 90s, by the way.
And that's a whole new thing, or a whole episode or two.
We got to talk about the adult content in kids cartoons. Yeah, we will,
because there's a lot of things that were said and done in those shows that families would watch together.
Yeah,
but I always got that feeling the Rugrats had a feel of the Muppet Babies because the Muppet Babies were in diapers. Some of them,
right.
Some of them couldn't read or write yet, and they were like very much, and they would teach you things. I just thought it was a brilliant idea to get, because some people like myself. I can't speak for you, but like, my sister loved Sesame Street. She liked the Muppets and the animals interacting with people.
Yeah.
I didn't like when I would watch the Sesame Street when the cartoons came on. I'm like, heck yeah, they were poorly drawn, but I'd rather watch that.
Oh, right,
I tuned myself out for whatever reason when it came to real Muppets. But when the Muppet Babies came on, I was aware of the movies. I liked the movies. I just didn't like, the other stuff. But then when it came to also the Muppet Show, it was great, dude.
Yeah. Oh, the Muppet Show was hilarious. It was really good. But see, Jim Henson always had this sense of irreverence with him. It was polite. He grew up a Christian Scientist, and he was, he was a very quiet individual. But that was part of his humor. He had this very dry wit. But man, when he was doing the Muppets, he could really be whoever he wanted to be. With Muppet Babies, they did do a remake in 2018. It was like a CG kind of a thing, and it lasted for a couple of years, but it didn't catch the way the original did. And there's the reason why it's not out. Most people can probably surmise that Disney, owns the rights to them, of course, because Disney and the Muppets were a thing, and Jim Henson was trying to sell to them, which we're going to get to as to that in a minute. He was trying to sell to not Bob Iger, who was the guy before Bob in the 80s.
Oh God,
Michael
Eisner.
So Jim was trying to sell to Michael Eisner, and he was trying to sell the Muppets off because he also didn't just want to be known for the Muppets and Sesame Street. He was always someone who was trying to reinvent his brand. And in the 80s, you had Labyrinth. You also had the Dark Crystal, because he was trying to do different things and branch out. He just didn't want to rest on his laurels and do that one thing and be known for like the Sesame Street guy. He wanted to do a lot of things, and he tried, but and that's why he was fine with selling the Muppets, but the deal had to be right. And I'll just get into why Jim, we'll get back to the Muppet Babies right now, but the reason Jim and Michael Eisner's talks crumbled was because Michael Eisner was always trying to get Sesame Street with it. They were trying to get the deal. They were trying to get the deal with Sesame Street. Disney wanted to own Sesame Street so bad, and that would piss Jim off. Jim was not a guy that got mad. He was very, like, the way, what you saw is what you got. You know, his friends
He looked like a relaxed hippie.
He was. Yeah. And it's funny growing up a Christian Scientist, but, you know, and that's kind of what led to his demise as well, which is unfortunate. But, there was one meeting where Michael Eisner goes, yeah, we're going to get Sesame Street too. And then Jim, who's known for not cussing really or really getting mad, says, damn it, Mike, damn it, you're not getting Sesame Street. He goes, you're not getting Sesame Street, damn it. And it would just really get under his skin. It would make his skin crawl that Michael Eisner kept trying to get Sesame Street, which was sold to, I think, the Sesame Workshop in 2000, maybe 11. And
that's part of PBS, no?
Yeah, it's PBS, and I have the accurate date here. But finally, it did get sold properly. To where Jim wanted it to go. He wanted it to go to the company that produced Sesame Street. He wanted it to be for the public. He wanted the kids to have those. He didn't want them to be charged up the wazoo for them.
Yeah.
And it to be commercialized. He didn't want that. That wasn't his thing. He was fine with the Muppets. He knew that was a commercial property. But he knew that the characters created for Sesame Street were a force for good. And he wanted to abide by that in his very soul. And then, of course, he died in 1990 because being a Christian Scientist, he grew up not really believing in he wasn't a practicing Christian Scientist when he died, but growing up like that, not asking for medical attention and not trusting the medical establishment, it literally being kind of against his religion. He was sick, kind of had the flu, kind of had the cold, but he just didn't want to bother anybody, and that was his character. And then finally, when it got to where he had to go to the hospital, the infection spread through his body, took him out. And then the talks failed, of course, because he had passed away. And it took years for them to get the rights to the Muppets and finally actually buy the Muppets. And by them, I mean Disney. But before Disney bought the Muppets, Sesame Street was safely sold to the Sesame Workshop. And they got to keep that. And so Disney never got their little hands on it. But with the Muppets, they did, what Jim was fine with. He wanted to sell to them, and he wanted that collaboration, which was going to go on for about 15 years was the deal. Like, he sold them, the Muppets. They get to work together exclusively for like 15 years on it and do all this stuff. And that would have been great. But unfortunately, Jim passed away. And then Muppet Babies, which was a great bastion of imagination for children. It wasn't just a commercial show in an era that was just chocked full of shows that were just toy commercials. That's not what Muppet Babies was. It was a kind of an offshoot of the Muppets and Sesame Street. It was about learning through imagination, using your imagination, because Jim understood that you learn differently. You learn in different ways, but with children, especially very young children, having them use their imagination, encouraging that was great. And in the show, if you remember, like, there's a lot of different properties that were used. Star Wars, Superman. The first episode as a spoof of Superman, Super Gonzo. And they're just riffing off the Christopher Reeve films because that's what was popular at the time. And it was terrific. And, the show, I have such a soft spot for that show, as you, I'm sure you do too. It's when we were, very little growing up with that, even the end of it. It was a very special thing that, unfortunately ended in 1991, fittingly a year after Jim passed. So that magic spark was gone.
I know they did play it in reruns sometimes, like on CBS. CBS would have it like around 6 or 7 in the morning, or sometimes 8 in the morning.
Yeah, early though, yeah.
Yeah, it was early. And then I remember like an episode of SpongeBob that reminds me of it, because where him and Patrick get in a box and then it turns into like a spaceship and they're rocking back and forth and they're both using their same premises and ideas to imagine the same kind of scenario. And they did that a lot, like you said, in the
first episode. The first episode, they do that with the submarine.
Yeah. And there's also one where I remember it was kind of a sad one where Gonzo felt like people were making fun of his nose or the way he looked.
Yeah.
And then they all reassured him, and like all, obviously the characters being different animals meant to be like different races, different cultures.
Yeah.
And for them all to get along together instead of making fun. I think the one character that was making fun of him stopped and realized the error of his ways. Yeah. And I thought it was great. That's good thing, because those are early lessons you want to teach the kids if they have those kind of things. And again, I thought it was perfect for the time period. And like you said too, I think they missed the boat, because the thing too, I was thinking when you were talking about like Disney, really wanted Sesame Street to knock off that comment real quick, is I can't picture Big Bird coming down, Disneyland crowded aisles, like in a big costume, or that big elephant. Man, that thing's
Snuffy, Snuffleupagus. Yeah. Oh man, but you know what? I can't imagine that would have just ticked me off, because when it comes to Disney, I love Disney, but they have their limits. But they have like the characters from Sesame Street with Mickey ears on, like don't you do that?
Yeah, don't have Elmo like that either, man. Like, tickle me, Elmo with Mickey ears. I don't know.
You're silly. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Then it would be like, okay, who's copying who, Elmo or Stitch?
Right, exactly. I know. Punch Buggy Blue. But no, with that, I'm glad it went down that way, and rest in peace, Jim Henson. I'm sure. I'm glad it went down in a way that would have pleased him. And maybe not the way they handled the Muppets. The Muppet Show that was like a live action thing a couple of years ago, I thought some of that was actually really good. So I thought that Disney should have just kept pumping money into it until they found an audience, because the show was fun. They had really good ideas in it.
Yeah, yeah.
It was unfortunate, but. The Muppet Babies did serve its purpose, lasted a long time, and it was great, and it did a lot of good. And being around during the run of Jim Henson, being around during Jim Henson's life, as opposed to it being produced after he was gone, was just such a boon, because he was such a great magnetic creative force, and he had such a great moral compass, and it wasn't pious, it wasn't self-righteous. He's just like, no, this is going to be for the kids, and they have to, I want them to be able to explore their imagination and just be able to grow that way. And the problem with it today, and why Disney hasn't put it out, is because everybody in the 80s and 70s loved Jim Henson as much as they do now. So Jim Henson, they didn't care that Jim Henson was using clips from Star Wars, clips from movies. And the low budget of the show, because it wasn't a very highly budgeted show.
Yeah,
they had to use a special effects crew, had to use old live footage from things, and that's why it looked so grainy and had such a unique style. It's because that had to do with money. The fact of the matter is they couldn't afford like fancy special effects, a lot of drawings, so a lot of the art was done like some of the art in Sesame Street. It was kind of the animation there, it was kind of cheap, but the story was good and the execution was good, so it kind of fit, and it became like an avant-garde kind of cartoon thing. The first time I saw certain classical images of paintings, Renaissance paintings and modern art was in Muppet Babies. And, but they use that to their advantage. But because nowadays everybody is so controlling over their IP, there is no way, and Disney being Disney, there's no way that Disney is going to, first of all, put out the show and get sued by not paying anybody, or pay everybody. George. Well, now they own Star Wars, so they don't have to worry about that. But there's still so many different things that we use, Indiana Jones and all that, clips and just imagery and all that nobody cared about when Jim was alive, and it was the 80s, because it was kind of freewheeling with that, and they liked Jim to use it. They didn't think the show was going to like steal money from them, really. But nowadays, Disney will never put that out. I mean, I hope I am wrong, but for the most part, Disney can't buy or should not be allowed to buy everything, and but they don't want to pay licensing fees, so that's why that show will never see the light of day, as far as I'm concerned, which is a terrible shame, because I don't know about the 2018 show. I know of it. I didn't grow up with it, of course. I didn't watch it, but I know that the original show is a classic, and it was just a shooting star, just this wonderful time period in Saturday animation, when you didn't have many, if any, shows that were based on imagination and not as much commercialism.
Yeah, because I think that was one that you could have easily seen on PBS or like maybe another network of cartoons on cable, but for it to last as long as it did on network television, when you had so much things going up against it, whether it was on ABC Saturday morning cartoons, Fox Kids, CBS, you just had so many things going against it, but it stood the test of time.
During an era of hyper commercialism and greed is good. Mm-hmm. That little hippie show, made by an a faded Christian Scientist who did puppetry, made his first puppet out of his mom's coat. It survived and it thrived for 7-8 years.
Well, what's crazy about it is like it would come on like on Sundays as well. So I really didn't notice it too much on Saturday.
Yeah.
But it would come on Sunday at first, and then I started to watch it on Saturday, because on Sunday they would show it right before, I think there was a hour before the pregame show for football. Mm-hmm. And so there's nothing else on television. My parents didn't have cable. So
mine either.
Yeah, so like I was was big time into sports, so I was waiting for football to start, or at least the pregame stuff.
Right.
And they would play a block of Muppet Babies.
Yeah.
And so like I would watch the Muppet Babies first, and then I'd be like, okay. And then it went from, oh my God, I got to kill time, to then it was just like, oh, I really like this. And I'm bringing my Binky Bear and everything else, and I'm excited. So yeah, I became a fan because of that. Really.
Do your kids still have the Binky Bear?
I think my oldest daughter does, Letty.
Have her send me a photo. I'll see if I can put it in the episode.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
I want to see how close they got to copyright infringement.
Yeah.
But no, that was a great one, and it's still with us obviously today. Mm-hmm. But Saturday morning was the first part of the equation. Now the second half, as we got a little older, became a big thing because then we started school. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I'd like to call the next segment Running Home After School, because when the Disney block started, because in the early mornings during the week we had, K-Cal Kids, the classic Disney shorts, which were terrific. And then we had, Saturday mornings, which had just a plethora of entertainment for us, and some very...
All the way to 12.
All the way to 12, yeah. For a long... It started like it's, 7?
6 or 7 in the morning. 6 or
7 in the morning.
Depending on the
12.
channel. Yeah.
Man, it was amazing. And then after school, Disney realized we have a block of time that we can, get some stuff going on. And, of course, in 1987, they came up with the after-school television show, Ducktales. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Funny thing about that is the woohoo, the executives go, that's kind of dumb, let's cut that. And it was fought for and finally kept. And the guy who the guy who performed the song, he's actually a rocker. And he goes, it's weird being known for DuckTales. And he sang it like on TikTok. It was during the pandemic. He kind of does the whole thing. He does the whole song, and come to find out that, you think it's just some guy covering it. Like, hey, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then you realize, he produced it originally, and it's the voice.
He wrote it, yeah.
And it's kind of cool, but he goes, it's kind of weird being a rocker and being known for a kid show like that. But I was a total DuckTales fan.
Absolutely.
I don't know when I stumbled on it, but from the pilot, which was 5 episodes, well, they turned it into 5 episodes, but basically it was a basic 5-episode miniseries, or like mini movie they did to kind of test the waters. On the Disney Channel. It did well. They put it out, I think it was on the Disney Channel. And when they put out, they broke it up into 5 pretty dark episodes for the kids show. But it was this great kind of callback to full animation. They did a lot with it. They put some money into it. Not the most money in the world, but, it was one of those things that ignited the eventual after-school block of cartoons that we all kind of learned to love.
Yeah, it was a great concept. I know we touched on it a little bit, but I like the fact that Huey, Dewey, and Louie, they had more recognizable voices, similar to an effect, but they had their different things that they would bring. They also whereas when Donald Duck would make his few and far between appearances on the show,
right.
You couldn't understand him like classic Donald. Like it was only words here and there, whereas Huey, Dewey, and Louie, they were understandable. They were more like fringe teenagers, like they were
preteens.
Yeah, preteens. And then you have a Scrooge McDuck that only cares about himself. He has an assistant, and then pilot.
Yeah, he's got Launchpad McQuack. He's got the butler, Duckworth, and then his maid, which I think in the pilot episode he hires him, and then she's got a daughter named Webigail.
Yeah, and what's the other character? He's kind of tall and
granddaughter.
He's kind of and they play off, but he's like tall. He helps with the money, and he helps with inventions.
No, the inventions, yeah. Gyro.
There you go.
Gyro Gear Loose.
Yeah, there you go.
like Screw Loose.
Yeah. But he had his little cast of characters to where you're liking them. Yeah. You're like these people are pretty cool, and you get more characters as the season goes on, but the storyline's good. They're dealing with the bank robbers are always trying to steal his loot.
The Beagle Boys. They all
yeah.
want his number one dime because that's apparently his lucky dime. Magica Dispel was always trying to steal his dime because they think it's a lucky dime that helped him grow his fortune.
Yeah.
Oh, I keep thinking of the song now. Race cars, lasers, aeroplanes. It's a duck blur.
Yep.
Might solve a mystery
or rewrite history.
DuckTales. Woo!
Yeah, it was awesome. It was catchy, and you always knew when the cartoon block was starting because you saw their webbed feet hit. Yeah. And so it was cool. Yeah, that was one of the cartoons. I think the block started at, was it 2 or was it 4? I'm trying Pacific time.
It's 4. It would have been 4 because I didn't get out of school till like 3.
Yeah, so it was 4. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like 4.
Yeah, so
in L.A. We were from L.A. Los Angeles.
Yeah. But you had that 2-hour block because we talked about it too. I mean, you had Tailspin, you had Timon and Pumbaa, Gargoyles, array of shows that went through there. Darkwing Duck, like you said.
Yeah, and Darkwing Duck is a spinoff because the creator of Darkwing Duck's like, oh, it's not a spinoff. I'm like, of course it's a spinoff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you have the robot. It's like a RoboCop. It's kind of a take on RoboCop.
Yeah, with one wheel. And that was Launchpad, right? Or
no,
that was
Blathering Blatherskite. That was his magic word that made because the armor was created by Gyro.
Yeah, that's
right. And he becomes this kind of like superhero.
Yeah, and
Gizmo Duck.
Yeah, Gizmo Duck. And then you had Launchpad was his partner too.
Yeah, so Launchpad was in that, and then Launchpad was in Darkwing Duck. So and Launchpad is the same Launchpad. So it is a spinoff. Don't care what the creator says. He's lying.
Yeah, and all the characters had that kind of goofy, like, is it a dog or is it like a rat kind of face?
Right. Anthropomorphized characters.
Yeah. So it was the same. I mean, it's nice try, but no, you're not fooling us.
No, exactly. It's like, I don't care how much, that Disney says. Disney will admit that it's a spinoff. Of course it was. It was a good one, though.
Oh, absolutely.
But DuckTales was kind of the originator of that after-school Disney block, because it was Disney.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had the Kids WB come on later on, like other Fox. First, before the Kids WB, though, it was Fox Kids.
Yeah, Fox Kids.
Fox Kids is where Batman, the animated series, began its life on TV after school.
Yeah.
And it continued on that way, but it was because of the competition, because, they were kind of the only real player in the game at that time that really did that, created its own content, didn't just repackage Saturday morning stuff. They got in, you had original programming, and the original block, I think, was DuckTales, Tailspin, Rescue Rangers, and Darkwing Duck.
Yep.
There were probably other things in between there, but those are the 4 that I remember being the major one.
Yeah, that was your staple. You knew you got those 4 episodes.
Yeah.
And it was nice, man, because in certain times too, like me being a sports fan too.
Yeah.
It would play into baseball, because K-Cal, they owned, or Disney owned the Angels at the time, so you would have the block of cartoons, and then it would play right into the Angels baseball.
Right.
So
yeah, man.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool, man.
I would stop watching after the
cartoons. Yeah, I know.
But no, but that's good. You had the both though.
Yeah,
that's really great. because you just had like hours and hours and hours where your parents could do whatever they want.
Yeah, pretty much. Or it's like I'd only take a break to use the restroom, or be like, hey, what's to eat? I'm hungry.
Snacks.
Yeah.
I would eat in front of the TV. My grandmother had this old, because my mom worked.
I had to sneak it.
Yeah. So my mom would work, so I would have, like, your dad would work. Your mom was a stay-at-home mom, right?
Yeah, she was a stay-at-home.
Yeah, which was great.
That was part of it too. At the time, my mom was babysitting for some of the people in the neighborhood.
Right.
So not only was I in tune with the cartoons, no pun intended, but everybody else was too.
Right.
So we'd sit down and watch our cartoons together.
Oh, see, that's a great group activity. That's great. Yeah. See, it was just me. I was an only child, and it was just me and my grandmother's. And she would have this old RCA TV that had the wooden doors that you would open up, and it had a slot on top, I think, for a VCR, and then the tube. And this thing weighed 200 pounds. It was only like a 22-inch TV, which was huge when she got it.
Yeah.
Sizes had changed over time, but it was kind of amazing, and I loved it. I was like 3 years old, knowing how to work all the buttons, the tracking and all that. I learned how to, work everything first, and I'd stumble on things and learn how to fix it, take them apart, all that stuff. But no, I remember that, and sitting down on the floor, because this TV was on the floor. I'd sit on the floor, huge remote. This thing looked like one of those crawlers.
Yeah.
Remember the fat remotes, the huge RC, and these things weighed like 2 pounds. And it was so worn by the time I came around that the buttons were bent in already, because it was kind of a metal front.
Yeah.
So you'd have to just wrench your thumb in there just to get the volume up or down. I'm telling you, man, it was a struggle.
Well, speaking of that real quick, and what happened, because that just brought up a memory. We had a 27-inch Technicolor TV, and that thing was heavy as hell. And that's how it was a knob one, the knob turn.
Oh, yeah.
So again, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of kids out there, a lot of adults now that know the struggle. Because we would fight when the channels did offer different shows.
Right.
We would be turning it back and forth to try to put it on the channel we want to watch. And lo and behold, we broke the knob. And so then it became, okay, when I watched my dad later on after we got yelled at for breaking it. He comes in with a wrench, and I see him changing the because it was just like the thin knob.
The pliers.
Yeah, the pliers.
The pliers.
And we were changing the channels of the pliers, dude. But it's
oh my god, I remember that when people would have pliers that would just permanently be TV pliers.
And people don't know the struggle because again, changing it with the pliers, analog television. So you'd find the channel, but that sucker's grainy. You need to find the right kind of antenna movement or put foil on it.
Metal hangers.
Yes.
Oh man, that was it. And yeah, and when you got it right, man, and your parents are ticked off enough, you'd have to stay in that position.
Yeah,
they're like, stay that way. When? Till the commercial break. You're like, oh, come on.
Yeah, or they're telling you the whole time they're critiquing your scientific movements on the TV, and then when you finally get it there, stay.
Yep.
Don't touch it.
The kids for many generations, for like Gen X will remember this, and boomers will remember, baby boomers will remember that they were the remotes before remotes were a real common thing. You'd have to
get up, change the channel.
Change it. Other way. More contrast. And you could control the contrast like an original DMG Game Boy.
Yeah.
It was a time. But
Definitely.
I mean, we luckily, didn't have to deal with too much of that. But a lot of our families really didn't upgrade TVs for a long time.
Absolutely.
So
we couldn't afford to.
Exactly. So we had old tube TVs long after it was cool.
Yeah. I mean, literally, while people had the big friggin' satellites, we were still with a Technicolor TV. Hey, UHF. Woo.
Funny thing is, though, watching vintage media, VHS Laserdiscs, and all that stuff, when you watch it on a tube TV, the medium it was made for, it actually looks really good. And that'll trip you out. If you watch like old media on like an old TV that it's meant to be shown on, it looks really clean. And you're like, wow, this wasn't as bad as I thought. Is when you try to watch them on high def screens, you're like, oh, this is terrible. It's like finger painting.
Or it's very cropped.
Very cropped. Yeah, that's another thing. It's just it's a different experience. But the vintage experience was fun. But I have a lot of great memories of that old TV, which isn't in the family anymore. It's gone, unfortunately. But someday I'll get another one just for funsies. And haul that 300-pound thing in. It's only 22-inch screen. But I remember just opening those doors all the way. They had silver rims. They had like a silver rim around each door. Pull them apart, turn it on, watch Ducktales after school, man. That's what I would do because I was an only child. I was very, kind of lonely, but, I had my tunes, you know what I mean? I was just waiting for mom to come pick me up. And I would watch those shows after homework or, before homework. But those were a lot of good memories. And one thing Ducktales always taught me that I never forgot. Scrooge says it to the boys. He says, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for Disney, it was a commercial endeavor, but they still had certain nuggets of wisdom in a lot of the animated shows. It wasn't just like boom, 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 just to kind of like capitalize on or even cause ADHD, and all those things, because like a lot of times our attention spans are sometimes thought to be either made better or worse by our technology. And a lot of times our attention spans, because of social media and things like that, are sometimes made to, seem to be getting shorter and shorter. But back then, classic storytelling, which, even today, storytelling is storytelling. It's done a certain way. If you're a raconteur, you know how to tell a story extremely well and you're very talented at it. But back then, they still did that and they still followed specific formats. And those formats are still key because those things taught me a lot of things as a kid and certain life lessons like work smarter, not harder. Not that there was anything wrong with hard work, but not to rely on luck, because it's, just by chance. But, there's a smarter way to do things sometimes. And I never forgot that because even as a kid, I'm like, hard work. That's what everybody tells you. And it's true. Hard work is terrific. It's good for you. But working smarter sometimes will help save you a lot of heartache. And again, that came from Ducktales.
Yeah.
I told my mom that when I was older. She's like, really? I go, yeah, I learned that when I was a kid.
It's funny you bring that point up because I do remember one that I tell him all the time, like my son, I said, don't, it's better to do things right the first time than do something the same, than do it twice.
Measure twice, cut once.
Yeah. And I remember that from DuckTales as well. It was the same thing because the boys would not clean their room.
Yeah.
And they kind of like half-assed it. And he's like, I've got to tell you again, we're not going to go on that trip until you clean your room. And then why do things twice when you could do it right the first time? And I remember that to this day, and I was like, dude, that's a freaking good quote, man.
Yeah.
You know, because it's true. Like even when you start working and you grow up and you try to cut corners at your first job, you know, because, you know, you're not really there to help out the job. Let's just face it. You want to make money and as fast as you can because maybe you got a girl or you got a car you want to buy or something cool to wear or something.
Both expensive.
Yes, exactly. But, you know, you always cut corners, but that's why I try to tell my girls, tell Walter, it's like it's better to just do it right the first time than have to go back and redo the damn thing twice.
Working smarter, not harder, because you're going to have to work harder in doing that.
Same premise.
Measure twice, cut once. And those are things that were instilled in us when we were very young, you know, and it's not like our parents didn't tell us that, but when your entertainment's giving it to you, you know, and you're getting it from your cartoons and the shows.
You tend to listen faster.
Exactly. Because it's part of something you really enjoy. And, you know, when you're glued to a TV or you're glued to a screen and that's, you know, given to you in a proper way, you know, it does stick with you. And again, they didn't do it in a way that spoke down to you. And a lot of those shows didn't do that, which is great. And the successful animated shows didn't. They talk to you like you were little people, not little kids. And I think that kind of those teachable moments just kind of stuck with a lot of us. And I think that's why we look around at the world today. We're like, didn't you guys watch Sesame Street too? Like, what is wrong with you? Didn't you grow up with or Ducktales and all that? You know, what's wrong with you people?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was just a really nice cartoon block to have back in the day, and like I said, like there was certain things in those other shows too that you brought up, like Chippendales Rescue Rangers, Duck McDuck.
There was a morality. There was still a morality there.
Disney was as clean as hell at that time, and you know, so there was it was a good crop of cartoons because again, when they launched it, that was let's just say it was pretty innovative because everyone was doing Saturday morning cartoons. It had been for years, you know, at that point, maybe a decade or two. Yeah. At least.
You mean for on TV?
Yeah, on TV, yeah.
Well, TV cartoons started in like the 50s, but like...
Well, I mean like Saturday mornings.
Saturday mornings, I think, I was looking back, like they might have been like the 60s. I got to look back and find out.
Yeah, because...
they'd had a lot of practice by then.
They've had a lot, but for you to put like... Because at the time it was like... If it's not news, if it's not like, you know, sports related or like, what is it, kind of not judge shows, but like, because those didn't start popping off at the
soap
time.
operas.
Soap operas,
yeah.
And I'm trying to think of maybe some talk shows, but not too many, but you'd have reruns of old comedies. Yeah, during the day and stuff like that. So
variety shows, too, for a lot of years.
Variety shows. So it was very innovative for them to throw cartoons on at that time after school because remember at that time, dude, everyone was like, hey, it's not like today where it looks like a ghost town on Christmas morning because maybe everything that someone gets or a kid gets in Christmas can be on an electronic device, on a computer, inside. You know, but back then, dude, everyone's quick to be on their bike. Everyone's quick to show their action figures, to play outside, to be with other kids, to ride bikes, so the whole 9 yards skateboard. But to have that on and compete against that too. Yeah. And it worked because it got kids in, it got kids to watch commercials. There's other things at that time like Discovery Zone. Right. You know, you want to get kids to go to places like that. You know, McDonald's.
Oh,
yeah. They're showing their toys that are related to your cartoons. Yep. So they knew what they were doing and it worked.
It did. And one thing that DuckTales didn't have, that kind of the shows before, speaking of variety shows and things like that, and they were more commercially focused, but one thing they didn't have starting in like 87, or at least with DuckTales, is music. Yeah. So DuckTales was like straight storytelling. It wasn't segmented, and you didn't have a lot of songs because before that, Muppet Babies, like almost every episode of these shows, Garfield and Friends, Alvin and the Chipmunks, you know, Muppet Babies, they all had music written and sung every episode. They were variety shows for a long time, and DuckTales changed that. Now, not that there was anything wrong. I loved a lot of those shows, but I was watching, I think, Garfield and Friends at one time going... And I was watching a few episodes in a row. I'm like, man, every show has music? And then I'm like, God, that's a lot of production. That's a lot. Because you have to have a studio. You have to have the actors sing. You have to have these songs written, you know, by talented. And that's a lot of money and a lot of time. You know, you don't realize these shows are on for like 7 or 8 years. Like, that's 7 or 8 years worth of music. Now, they weren't always great, but they were fun or funny, and they related. But DuckTales... Someone had to compose them. Yes, someone had to compose them. I mean, it's so much work editing it and doing all that. And it was such a huge endeavor, but so much was put in. And the era with DuckTales kind of changed that. And it morphed into something else because those other shows were ending, or at least in the middle of their run or beginning their run, and just had a few years to go when DuckTales really hit its stride. And DuckTales went for, I'm sorry, go ahead, you were saying?
No, go ahead.
DuckTales went for, I think, 107 episodes. But
yeah, it had a good run.
It had a good run because it was really successful. And shows before that, like Transformers, Thundercats, He-Man, the thing about TV back then is you would have something called their syndication package, which meant the amount of reruns you could establish. The amount of episodes you can establish before you can hit reruns. And that's where they made their money, because you could have a show running for 13 weeks, and that magic number was 65 episodes. So a lot of shows in the 80s, sometimes, that's why you, like, season 1 of, like, Transformers, 65 episodes. You're like, wow. But the second season's like 11 episodes, 12 episodes, They
fell off. The storytelling wasn't good, yeah.
But the thing is, the reason they did that is because they're like, well, good or bad, we have syndication. We've got enough for a syndication package of reruns. We don't have to do any more. We don't have to think about it again. This will keep us going, make us money in advertising for the next year. But if a show is really successful, it got a couple more seasons, but there weren't that many episodes. It was like, now they're done like adult shows, which is like, well, you get a few episodes for the first season, then for the second, then for the third, because live action TV, I should say, it used to be 22 episodes season, every season. And and if it made it to 60 some odd episodes or 100 episodes in live action, then of course you got your syndication package and you got it that way. But cartoons, it was different. But that's why there were so many episodes done for some of these shows. But DuckTales was successful enough because when they went into syndication in 1990, they had enough. And they did, 88, 89, they did a couple more seasons, and they had their package of 107 episodes, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not reading from the wrong show, because they did reach over 100. I know that. And that meant that they were a really successful show. And yeah, it was, let me see. I'll cut this part out.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, it consists of 65 episodes for the first season, massive number. I'll find out later. But it was definitely over 100 episodes. And same thing with Muppet Babies. They also had 100 and some odd. It might have been, I think Muppet Babies had 107 episodes. But DuckTales also did, around those kind of numbers too. That was like the magic number for a successful animated show.
Yeah, and I think if I remember right, Muppet Babies lasted on television with reruns to, I want to say, 94, 95.
Yeah, I think.
Because I do remember almost being in high school, maybe 8th grade, and it was still on.
91. Only because I remember it was a year after Jim died.
Okay.
So after Jim Henson died, it was a year, but they kept it in syndication.
Yeah, syndication.
Long.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And then it went to cable, I think, after 94 or something like that. Something around those years. They kind of played with it. They made some money off it, and then that was it.
Now, I got a question going back to DuckTales real quick, since we were on it there for a minute. What city, like Duckburg, remind you of?
Oh, my God. San Francisco?
Exactly.
Okay.
I knew we were going to be on the same page with that, because a lot of people like to say different things, but I do remember they did have a version of the Golden Gate in the background. It was sort of like yes, and they did have like the hilly type beach type front.
Okay, I never thought about that before, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and I thought about that because I always like, Duckburg was more San Francisco-ish to me. I think what was the city called in for Darkwing?
I can't remember, but no, I know.
But that one gave me a Gotham type New York,
Well, yeah, because Darkwing was based, it was like a spoof of Batman.
Yeah.
It was like DuckTales meets Batman. And that's probably the way they pitched it. They're like, okay, we got a new show, guys. They're the executives. Hold on to your pants. We know Batman's big right now. DuckTales is still going on. It's really big and successful. Batman meets DuckTales.
Yeah.
And the executives are like, the hell out of my office.
Yeah, they were like, Bat Duck, follow me.
Bat DuckTales. Duck. Tails, bat, duck, bat tails.
Or we can mix Gizmo Duck with him, and we'll be Robo Bat Duck.
Well, because he did make an appearance, right?
Yeah. He was on the show because he would have villains, and it was almost like the Flash too, because it was Darkwing Duck had his
Rogues Gallery.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he definitely did.
The alter ego that was the same, looked just like him, but was in yellow.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's a reverse Flash there.
That's right. Oh yeah, that's right. He was a rat type character, and then Nega Duck. Nega Duck, have to be careful with that, but it's like the negative version of Darkwing, similar costume.
Yeah.
But no, we'll have an episode about Darkwing, because their marketing gearing up to that show was brilliant.
Oh, it was awesome.
And it was just so torturous too for a kid, because one day a week is forever for a kid.
Oh yeah, and the thing too with that show, what I liked was the music.
Yeah,
and
it was good.
The fact that they were hitting on mid '90s to early '90s hip hop.
Yes,
and the baggy clothes, it just worked.
I'm not sure if the woman who sang the theme song was a black singer. She might have been. I want to look that up, because the music in that show was really good. The theme songs, those shows, the Disney block had some amazing theme songs.
Yeah,
where the shows in the '80s, like Muppet Babies, had like a '50s throwback. The '80s and the shows of the '80s of the Disney block getting into the '90s, really, you're right, they really hit that hip-hop black music kind of a thing. They really tapped into that.
I remember a lot of the kids would be like, when there's trouble, you call DW.
Queen Dad. Let's get dangerous.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, dude.
That was a great show.
Yeah,
we'll talk about it. I got that on one of the outlines.
All right, good.
It's coming up. But right now, I want to dedicate the rest of this episode to something that doesn't get a lot of attention in animation, especially animated shows.
Okay.
Like, they did start doing credit scenes finally in animated shows, because Warner Brothers, Disney, they didn't always do that or let you know who was playing who. They like to keep the mystery alive. But for Muppet Babies, you had the voices of Frank Welker, Larry O'Brien, Greg Berg, Russi Taylor, Katie Lee, Howie Mandel for seasons 1 through 2, I think of Scooter, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Dave Coulier did seasons 3 through 8. Barbara Billingsley played Nanny, of course. But no, a lot of these actors did a lot of different shows, because voice actors back then, they did a lot, like voice actors today, there's a few that you know of, and those guys do everything. Tara Strong is like every voice out there, especially in the 90s and late 90s, early 2000s.
A question on that one. My mom always had the theory, because she would hear different voices. Like, now we know too, like the Ninja Turtle voices, like that one guy that does Raphael, he did Animaniacs, he did Tiny Toons.
Yeah, he was Yakko, I think.
Yeah, he did several, right? But my mom always had a theory, and I want to run this by you since you've been in the industry.
Yeah.
Was there a kind of union for those voice actors to where they had a specific pile of actors that they could use, or voices that they would go for? Because my mom was always like, man, we don't really, hear of or see them using, different people or different voice actors. It's always the same ones in cartoons.
Yeah, so it's like anything as an actor. The unions, I always go back to the Disney strike era, because that's where they originated and came from.
Okay.
But in toward the 40s and then the 50s and 60s later on, you did have animation unions. But, they are also part of SAG now. So they're also part of the main actors unions, and they have been for a long time. But back then, yes, they were part of SAG-AFTRA. AFTRA was like daytime and news, but they merged with SAG, the Screen Actors Guild.
Okay.
But no, around that time, they totally did. They were in the union.
So my mom was right.
Yeah,
okay.
and they were. But the thing is, though, they were also in agencies, because the game is also who's your agent. So if they had a good agent, and they could have had a good repertoire, like they had a good resume, like everybody would want to work with them. Because a lot of times, you want to work with people you like. And in the business, you do that a lot. So voice actors, just like actors like Tom Cruise or anybody. Tom Cruise, Clint Eastwood, whatever. Pedro Pascal today, if you like the guy, you're like, yeah, let's do it. And if you're a good worker, you're not too difficult.
You're not messing up your lines.
No.
You know your stuff. You can nail it the less amount it takes.
And there's not as much, it's not an ego-driven world when it comes to voice acting. You can go in your slippers and a bonnet.
Yeah,
as a woman, you go in a bathrobe. It doesn't matter. You just do your voice work. You can be look like hell. It doesn't matter. You don't need makeup. You don't need any of that stuff. You can go from gig to gig to gig to gig. And a lot of them did. And your mom's right. Yeah, they were in a union. They all were in the big agencies, and that's how they got the jobs.
And that's how my mom kind of got it too. Like remember when Miss Doubtfire came out?
Yeah.
And you saw what's his name, the actor again?
Robin Williams.
Robin Williams, when he did the voiceover and stuff like that.
Piss off, Lou.
Yeah. And he's just in there in like regular clothes and watching the screen and matching his voice to the character.
Yep.
And it's like, dude, that finally gave me at the time, because I didn't know what it looked like to voice characters at the time. Yeah. And then when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so that's when my mom was like, yeah, it seems like they always, that's where her theory.
Yeah, she was right. Yeah, no, they definitely did. And the interesting thing about going back to the voice acting and for Ducktales, you had an interesting character actor that was named Alan Young, and he did Scrooge. And if you remember Scrooge, if you remember Alan Young, he was in Mr. Ed. And he also was in the movie The Time Machine in 1960. I love that movie. For years, I never knew that was Alan Young, and I loved The Time Machine. It's behind you there, the Warner Archive. But it's in my collection. I'm sorry for those listening. I'm pointing to the physical Blu-ray copy of The Time Machine from 1960, which Alan Young was a supporting character in. And he was such a talented actor. Lived in 2013, they did an Xbox remaster of the game. He did the voice of Scrooge again. They got him back. He was still around for that. Wow. And that was his last hurrah as a cartoon voice actor.
I will say one last thing on DuckTales.
Yeah.
Or actually two things,
sure.
which I liked. One of the episodes I remember about that show was the fact that it was shortly after Batman 2. And when the Penguin, I don't know if you remember in the movie where he takes control of the Batmobile.
Yeah.
And crashes it through things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
One of the Beagle Boys took control of Gizmo Duck and made him rob a bank.
No way.
Yeah, and but he wasn't sitting in anything. He was just like using they had, rigged his outfit.
Suit, yeah.
And then they were like remote control, and they're like, oh my God, Gizmo Duck, he's robbing the bank. So it was right after that Batman movie. So I'm like, they totally copied that. When it spawned the Nintendo games.
Oh, the Nintendo games, yes.
The Nintendo games. That's what I was going to bring up. Yeah. To this day,
NES.
Dude, I think it's part 2, which is ridiculously expensive to buy.
Yeah.
If you're just looking for the cartridge itself.
Just the cartridge, yeah.
And the game itself, I remember part 1, it was specific episodes from the show, but just like the TV show itself, the part 1 was very well written and designed for Nintendo 16-bit graphics or 8-bit.
Yep.
It was great. I thought it was a great video game. Told the story, utilized some of the episodes. You had, you could do certain things with Scrooge. And then part 2 was brilliant too. And so I really thought, like for me, like how they haven't done a true DuckTales game. I don't know if they've done one with a new side, the flip side ones, but the fact that they haven't digitally remastered it or tried to...
The Xbox game from 2013 is a DuckTales game. It remakes the original one.
I didn't know that.
It's a remaster, but no, there's a company that does like Shredder's Revenge and Scott Pilgrim. It's called Way Forward, I think is the company. That would be great to do a new old version in that kind of style, 8-bit style. That would be great. I'd like to see a real Ghostbusters game that way too.
Yeah.
Like, dude, they should do that. Would be great. No, those games were great. Darkwing Duck goes for like $85 to $100 just for the cartridge. That was a great game too.
Yeah, and I mean, and it was hard.
Yeah, that was a difficult one.
Between that one and Tailspin, because I gave up. I remember
Tailspin.
I remember I had bought Tailspin and I was trying to beat it, and I gave up like not even 2 weeks into it. I wound up giving it to a friend because I'm like, this game's
terrible.
It's
and they were $70.
Yeah, it was terrible, and it was just really difficult. Like I nearly cracked it. I was so mad. Because
Rage quit. Yep.
Yeah, those games were tough to play.
You couldn't save. You had to go back to the beginning. I play those on my Steam Deck, and it has like an instant save. That's the only way I beat I'm sorry, not DuckTales. Darkwing Duck.
Yeah,
that was the only way I did. I kept saving every few steps, and I'm like, nope, I'm not doing this again.
Yeah, because nobody wants to go back the entire way back.
No. Oh
yeah, those are some frustrating games, but at least the DuckTales ones were kind of beatable. They had their hard, like for me, it was, I think from part 1, it was the Space Odyssey one, like sort of like the Star Wars type level.
Yeah,
that one was really hard to beat, but once you beat that one, you got the game. But it was cool. I just liked the storytelling in that one too. So
we should play the game after this. We should play I'm going to pull them up on my Steam Deck and we're going to play them.
But that was a smart thing too about Disney, because you would go to Disneyland at the time and you would find, you can't find it now. Like I would love to get a Scrooge McDuck. I would like to find maybe some of the other characters, because at the time in the 90s you can go and get a Gargoyles action figure or a stuffed animal or a shirt. They don't have any of that stuff anymore. If anything, you go on Amazon, you can find it.
Yeah, go on eBay.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can find good deals. It depends. You know, but you got to hunt for them.
But there's a lot of remakes now where they make the shirts where, it'll be the cartoon afternoon things. Like you'll see a nice DuckTales shirt with the original cast or a Chip and Dale's or something like that.
RR.
Yeah, RR on the patch or whatever.
Yeah, there was a logo. Yeah.
Dude, the coolest thing I saw was these two guys, and one was walking with a Dell shirt, like the whole what do you call it, Indiana Jones style.
Right, because Chip and Dale we'll talk about that when we go through our Chip and Dale phase, but they were modeled after Magnum PI and Indiana Jones.
Yeah. He had that shirt, and then he had the Magnum PI like Dell one. I'm like, oh, those are cool freaking shirts. So
yeah, if you know, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think what we were talking about earlier, just without realizing it, when I put these episodes or when we put these episodes together to talk about on this episode on this show. God, I'm saying episodes a lot. Alliteration, kind of. Is that they taught us a lot of empathy. And I think that's the greatest thing about what we grew up with that we don't really see as much anymore. Is I think they taught kids a lot of empathy and a lot of way to respect your environment, yourself. And I don't think kids get a lot of that anymore. And that was an important factor that I don't even know if they realized they were doing.
That's a great point, because there was, there was reasoning. I mean, yeah, you'd have your goofy episode here and there, but there was a point to all these episodes, and there
was a moral compass.
Yeah, whereas now it's like if you get a fart noise, that's the premise of the show.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I love Teen Titans Go. Don't get me wrong. It was a great show. But it's not exactly the same.
It's not exactly teaching you qualities.
Right. Exactly.
And there would be, and the last thing I got on this is there would be in these afternoon blocks of cartoons, the importance of family. Like maybe there'd be like a, the whole teenager, oh, I don't need you right now, Mom, or I'm doing this, or Dad, or whatever like this, or you're always wrong, Uncle Scrooge.
Right.
And then they come back and then they apologize, and then he, instead of yelling at them, he'd be like, well, I know, boys, but that's part of learning, and now you know. And
I was your age too at one time.
Yeah. Like, it was a Scottish kilt.
I know.
Yeah.
But no, they had that, and it was very much almost a callback to the 50s. I mean, shows just still had that about, and they had that, like I said before, moral compass. It would bring you back, it would round everything out. And yeah, in life, things aren't always perfect, but I mean, the great thing it did do, and Sesame Street did this too, but a lot of shows around that time showed different kinds of families, because they were a family. It was wealthy, but it was still, they didn't have their mom there. Their uncle directly, Donald, wasn't there. They were left with this stranger. They all grew to be family. And, Mrs. The nanny there,
Beasley,
Mrs. Beasley, and Abigail. None of them were related, but they were all family. And I think a lot of those shows of that time did kind of have that like non-nuclear family aspect. Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, they were all family. They were friends. None of them were blood related. Maybe Chip and Dale. I don't know if they ever went into that, but it was very, very interesting that they had that. And coming from a single parent household, and I had like an odd family dynamic that was just, I say odd, I mean just different from the norm and a nuclear family. And it was comforting, I guess, without even realizing it as a kid. But it was great that they kind of did that, to kind of tap into the zeitgeist of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of good things came from those cartoons.
A lot of good things, which we're going to expand upon more in the next episodes. But for now, we want to say thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of TNT The K-Cal Kids. Once again, I'm Ty Justice.
Todd Fox.
Thank you so much for watching and listening.